In a Los Angeles suburb where the day begins with the hum of coffee machines and burnt toast, a single gray Toyota Camry aroused curiosity but not suspicion. It sat in an ordinary parking lot among ordinary cars, lightly dusted with dust, the kind that doesn't arouse any interest. And for no reason, the driver, wearing a dark baseball cap and navy jacket, rolled down the window and looked up at the sky. He always did that before starting a new day. But this time was different. This morning he had turned on the taxi app for the first time in his life, the name on the system, John R. Ordinary. Reliable. Nothing indicated that one of the most famous actors in the world, Keanu Reeves, was hiding behind that name, that he wasn't doing it for a movie. And not for a show. He needed something else real. There was a silence in it that sought out other voices. A silence that could listen. The first call was a woman with a child. She was hurrying to the station to meet her husband, who was returning from the army. Her voice was trembling with excitement. The child in her arms was babbling something cheerfully. Keanu just smiled and nodded. She didn't recognize him. And that was good. After several such trips, Keanu felt as if something was being washed away from his soul. Easily. Unconstrainedly. Each passenger brought with them a story, a phrase, a mood. All these moments were alive, and then, she sat in the back seat and didn't say a word. A young woman. About 35. A tired face. Tear-stained eyes. Short hair, apparently recently cut. Keanu, as always, greeted her softly, "Good morning. Where are we going?" "Anywhere," she answered in a whisper. That he glanced at her briefly in the rearview mirror. Something was wrong. But he didn't ask. He just started the car and drove away. The silence stretched. He decided to turn on the radio, but instead he heard a soft, "You know how to be silent." "That's good. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words," he answered. She smiled. And then she began to speak. At first cautiously. Then more and more. "You know, I thought about dying today. Just go out onto the bridge and..." She swallowed her words. "But instead I opened the app, because I thought, what if the world is still capable of surprising?" Keanu didn't react sharply. He only slowed down. The bridge was still far away. But the cold went through his skin. And then, she exhaled. "I was picked up by a taxi driver with a voice I heard when I was a child. You sound like..." "Sorry, I guess I did." "Who?" he asked softly. "An actor." "But that's impossible." He smiled and said nothing. When they reached a small park in Hollywood, she suddenly said, "Can I just sit here for a while?" Without saying a word. "Sure," Keanu replied, and turned off the engine. She sat silently. And he sat next to her. They both looked at the ducks in the pond. The city hummed somewhere nearby, but it was quiet here. And then she looked at him for the first time directly and said, "I still don't believe it. But if it's really you, thank you. You just saved me." No heroism. Just listening. When she got out without another word, Keanu stayed for a minute. Then he opened her itinerary and saved it as special. No photo. Just the word special. Then he turned the app back on, and the next passenger was supposed to be a man in a business suit. But what happened to him shocked even Keanu. Keanu sat behind the wheel for a few minutes after the woman had left. Her eyes haunted him in the rearview mirror. There was something there, pain, but not hopeless. Maybe that was what he was looking for on this trip. not drama, but that moment on the edge where things could still be changed. His phone rang. A new call, Richmond, an 8th man, 40 plus, wearing a dark suit. "Let's go," he said to himself and started the engine. A burly man stood on the sidewalk. Perfectly shaven, briefcase in hand, his face frowning. He looked like a typical corporate predator, with every minute planned out a week in advance. That he got into the back seat without saying a word. He just sent the address, an elite office in the city center. "Good afternoon," Keanu said. He muttered. "Just go. I'm not in the mood for chatter." Keanu nodded. But something in the man's voice didn't match his appearance. It wasn't anger, it was fatigue. Deep, chronic. They drove in silence for about 10 minutes. Then suddenly the passenger spoke up. "Have you ever felt like you were a mistake? That everything you become isn't really what you're supposed to be?" Keanu was slightly surprised. But he answered calmly, "Yes. More than once." "Have you ever disappointed anyone you love?" "I think so. But more often than not, it's yourself." The man looked out the window. Then he took a piece of paper from his pocket and stared at it for a long time. Keanu saw in the mirror, it was something handwritten. "My daughter wrote this last night. I found it in a book I gave her once. She left me a letter. And then she left the house." His voice trembled. Keanu was silent. The man continued, "In it, she wrote that I had become a stranger to her. That I no longer laughed, listened, or lived. That I was an empty clone of the dad she once knew. She said she was going to look for a real life. And that I never tried to find mine." That he closed his eyes. And silence fell on the salon, as if someone had turned off all the noise of the world around him. "Is she right?" Keanu asked. The man didn't answer for a long time. "Yes," he finally whispered. "I wake up in a house where I live without love. I go to a job I hate. I have everything and nothing. And you know what's the worst? What? I once wanted to be a musician. I played in the streets. And I was happy. I had a girlfriend who wore my old jacket and sang with me in the rain. And then, reality came. Loans. Plans. Career. And I became what she called empty." He looked at the driver. "For the first time. Right in the mirror. And you? Who are you, really? Because you don't look like a regular taxi driver." Keanu smiled out of the corner of his mouth. "Just a listener." "Sometimes that's enough." The man didn't come out of the office right away. He was sitting there clutching a letter. "I'm not going there. Not today. That I'm going to the club. The place where I first played guitar. Just sit. Do you want me to give you a ride?" "Seriously?" "Yes. And not as a taxi driver. As a listener. As a friend, if you let me." The man nodded. And smiled for the first time. They drove in the other direction. At that moment, a new message appeared on the app screen. "Accident on Hollywood Boulevard. 3 injured. Assistance needed, area closed. Pedestrians advised not to approach." Keanu looked at the screen. And suddenly he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, because the news showed a picture of the woman with short hair, the first one he had driven that day. She was among the injured, and he was the last person to speak to her. When Keanu saw the face of that woman on the screen, his first passenger that day, his heart sank. It was her. Without a doubt. Her gaze, filled with the pain and despair he had tried to dispel during the drive, was now looking back at him from the news headline, 3 injured in Hollywood Boulevard crash. 1 woman hospitalized in critical condition. He stopped right in the middle of the road. The man in the back seat, the same businessman with the lost dreams, looked at him in surprise. What happened? Keanu showed him the screen. That's her. He whispered. She was just here. Alive. Talking. Smiling at the end. I thought we had changed something. That she had gotten better. The man was silent. For the first time all day he had nothing to say. Keanu got out of the car. He took a deep breath. Then he sat back down abruptly and said, I have to go there. Can I go with you? Go. But I'm not the driver anymore. I need to know what's wrong with her. They arrived quickly. The road was blocked, but he showed his ID, an old one from a movie, which he sometimes used in extreme cases, and they were let through. The police, an ambulance, 2 firefighters were standing near the scene. The woman's car was lying on its side, with its side crushed. It was obvious that a jeep had hit it at high speed. Shards of glass, crumpled doors, the smell of burning. But most importantly, she wasn't there. They've already taken her away, said one of the witnesses. Witnesses say that she was sitting calmly, even smiling before the accident. But after the impact, she didn't lose consciousness. She said only one word. He was listening. Keanu froze. Where did they take her? He asked. To Cedars-Sinai. He turned to the man. Are you going? Don't even think about it. The waiting room was crowded. Keanu went to the receptionist. I'm looking for a woman. Short dark hair, wearing a black jacket. She was brought in after a car accident on Hollywood Boulevard. I'm a taxi driver, but we spoke. This is important. The nurse nodded, searching the database. She was transferred to the intensive care unit. Serious internal injuries. She's in critical condition. But, the woman looked at him carefully. She left a note. For the low-voiced taxi driver. Is that you? Keanu nodded slowly. The nurse pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It only said, I don't know who you are. But you reminded me that I still exist. If I don't survive, thank you. If I do, I'll find you and listen to you the way you listen to me. Keanu squeezed the note. His eyes moistened. He slowly sat down in the chair, and the man sat next to him, silently. 2 figures. One was an actor searching for reality. The other was a businessman who had lost his dream. You couldn't have known, the man whispered. But we think we're in time. That a good conversation is already salvation. But life is different. It breaks even those who are almost standing. They sat for a long time. When the doctor came out later, his face was tense. She's still alive. But in a coma. Everything is on the verge. The next few hours are crucial. She repeated your name before losing consciousness. She said you gave her the silence in which she could hear herself. Can I see her, for a few minutes? And only you. The ward was quiet. Only the machines beeped steadily. She lay pale, small, fragile. Her face was calm, as if everything was already behind her. Keanu sat down next to her. And didn't speak. He just took her hand. And SAT wasn't a scene from a movie. There was no music, no editing. Just a heart. And a hand. And the feeling that this moment was the most important. When he came out, the man was waiting in the hallway. "When I get home, I'll get out my old guitar," he said. "And even if no one listens, I'll sing. Because you reminded me, you don't have to wait for an accident to start living." Keanu smiled. "Sometimes you just have to get into someone else's car. And tell a stranger everything. Whose face seems familiar, but you're afraid to believe it." Exactly. Late that evening, when Keanu returned to his Camry, the app was activated again. And a new passenger was already waiting. That he looked in the mirror. Okay. Another story for the night, but the next trip was anything but ordinary, because the passenger turned out to be a journalist who recognized him, and he had his own story, a secret he didn't want to reveal to anyone. Night had fallen on Los Angeles in a soft darkness, like a blanket covering the city after a long and tiring day. Millions of lights twinkled in the windows, and the city lived to its own rhythm. And in the shadow of this hum, a single Toyota Camry moved again, without advertising, without a hint of luxury. The silence in the cabin was familiar, almost homely. Keanu opened the app. New passenger. Name, Samuel G. Route, downtown Venice Beach. It seemed like nothing special. But when the passenger got into the car, Keanu sensed something different. The man was in his 40s, wearing glasses, with a short beard and a notebook in his hands. He immediately stared at the screen of his phone, then looked up, and froze for a moment. "Interesting," he said quietly. "Something wrong?" Keanu asked with a smile. No. It's just, you look a lot like a famous actor." "Too much like him." Keanu didn't answer. He was used to such words. But this time the tone was not condescending but attentive, studying. Like that of someone who is used to digging up the truth. "Excuse me, but, you're not Keanu Reeves, are you? And even if you were, would you believe it?" The actor answered with a barely noticeable smile. "That I already believe it. And you know what's most interesting?" The man showed his ID. "That I'm a journalist. A researcher of human stories. I'm looking for material about a new kind of anonymous heroism. And someone told me that there was a taxi driver in the city who listens to people better than any psychotherapist. I thought it was a beautiful legend." Keanu sighed. "And what now? Are you going to write a sensation?" Hollywood star Undercover. The journalist takes off his glasses. His eyes are not predatory, not hunting. There is something else there. Tiredness. And anger. But not at Keanu. "I am not looking for a sensation. I am looking for forgiveness." Silence hangs in the cabin. Keanu turns to him a little. "What do you mean?" "I once ruined a man's life. With an article. I thought I was doing a journalistic investigation. But I destroyed his reputation, career, family. And only 2 years later did I find out that it was all a mistake. He committed suicide. His letter was addressed to me. You didn't listen to me. You only listened to your versions." Keanu stared straight ahead. No sound. No movement. "I promised myself that I would never write an article again until I had experienced the story from the inside. I had felt it with my heart. That's why I started looking for the incognito driver. Because this is not an article. This is a way to make amends." The car drives on. They are silent. And then the journalist takes out the recorder. "Can I record it? Yes. But only for myself. Not publicly. I may not use it anymore. I just want to remember that such moments happen. Keanu nodded. Record it, the journalist presses a button. Tonight I got into the car with a man who looks like an actor. But in reality he is a mirror. He doesn't say much, he doesn't play roles. He listens as if every word you say is the most important. And when you speak, you suddenly hear yourself. The real you. Without filters, without scripts. He stops. Do you want to know why I won't expose you? Why? Because you saved more lives than any big-name article. I heard the story about the girl you drove today. I was there in the hospital. She told the nurse, he reminded me I was still here. Is she alive? Yes. Stable. And she seems to want to live. Because of the soft-voiced taxi driver. Keanu sighs. For the first time all evening, with relief, then maybe this night wasn't in vain. No. It became the most important night of my life. When they reached Venice Beach, the man took his time getting out. He looked out at the ocean. Then he looked back. If you ever decide to leave this world, I have a microphone for you. Not for talking, not for showing off. Just so you can keep listening. People need it. What if I'm not an actor? So I just took a ride with the best driver in town. That he got out and drove off into the night. Keanu stayed on the shore, in the car. He looked at the waves. At the light of the lighthouse in the distance. And he felt, something he had long forgotten, peace, and at that moment the app dinged again. A new passenger, but the name sent shivers down his spine. Alexandra R. And if it was her, the woman from the hospital, then she woke up. And she wanted to see him again. The name on the screen flashed like lightning. Alexandra R. Keanu froze for a moment. His brain tried to rationalize it could be someone else. A last name with an R was common. Maybe it was a coincidence. But his gut told him it was her. He confirmed the call, the address, Cedars Sinai. A place where she could be discharged. The car pulled away as if it knew the way. As he pulled up, the hospital doors slowly opened. There she was, standing in the doorway, slightly pale, with a bandaged arm, wearing the gray jacket he remembered. Her hair was a little unruly now, but her smile was genuine. The soft light of the streetlights reflected in her eyes, like a hint that something important was about to happen. "Hello," she said. "Hello. Is this your shift yet?" "It doesn't end," Keanu replied. "Until the stories end." She sat down. And for a moment silence. But not uncomfortable. But necessary. "I don't remember the accident," she began. "But I remember you. Your silence. Your eyes in the mirror. I remember thinking, this stranger knows more about me than the people I've lived with for years. And you left a note, because I felt that maybe this was my last chance to say, thank you, to someone, but it wasn't goodbye. No. It was, like a prayer. If I survive I'll find you." She looked at him with a smile that no longer carried pain, but only tenderness. "You know, I lied." "About what?" "About how I just lost myself. Actually. I'm a writer. Once upon a time. I wrote about people like you, quiet, real, invisible. But life made me someone else. Cold, distant. I lost my voice. But in your car, I remembered who I was. Keanu leaned a little closer. I'm not an actor. Not a doctor. And not a hero. I just listen. That's all I'm capable of. Sometimes that's enough to save a life. Mine was definitely. They were driving through the night city. Without a route. Without a navigator. Just where the road led. The windows were open, the wind played in her hair. She spoke. He listened, about the father she lost as a child, about the man she loved, but who betrayed her at her most difficult moment, about the books that were never published, about her fear of being invisible, despite the fact that her soul was screaming, and then she asked, "And you? Who were you?" Before the taxi, he thought for a moment. A person who was lost among other people's expectations. I worked, played roles, both in life and in the cinema. And I thought that was enough. But something died inside. And silence became my native language, and now you are returning it to people. Maybe. At least a little. They stopped at the observation deck above the city. The light of Los Angeles was spreading like stars under their feet. You know, she said, all my life I have dreamed of a meeting that would not be the beginning of a relationship, not the end, not an adventure, but simply a moment of truth. One moment where everything falls into place, and this is him. Yes, she placed her hand on his. I don't know who you are to this world. But to me, you are the person who gave me a new voice. And what will you do with it? I will write. Not about you. But about everyone. About people who need someone to listen to them. When he returned her to her home, a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, she didn't leave right away. She turned and said quietly, "Tomorrow I will write the front page. And if you ever want someone to write your story, I will be there. But not as a journalist. But as a woman who also searched for meaning, and found it in a taxi." She left. And left behind, peace. Keanu was left alone. He watched her front door close. Then he slowly typed "End shift" on his phone. The screen flickered. For the first time that day, he turned off the app, but the sky above the city remained alive. And there was another night ahead, because as long as there are people who are not afraid to speak, there must be someone who is not afraid to listen. The morning sun appeared over the hills of Los Angeles slowly, carefully. Its rays pierced through the haze and touched the windows of those who were still sleeping and those who could no longer. It was a new light. Pure. Keanu Reeves stood on the balcony of a small room, not his house, not a hotel. It was a temporary shelter. An artist once lived here, who left fragments of poetry on the walls, right on the plaster. In every silence there is a voice waiting for an answer. He had read these words yesterday. And now, in the morning, they sounded different. Deeper. In the last days, his life had unfolded like a book. The stories of strangers had become his personal pages. The woman who wanted to disappear was now looking for meaning in writing. The man who played the role of success had returned to his guitar and his true self. The journalist who once broke fates understood how to protect them, and he himself, Keanu, learned to live in a world where there was no need to play, but the hardest thing ahead was the return to himself. That day, for the first time, he did not open the app. No trips. No routes. Only one goal, to get to the park where it all began. Where he sat with the first passenger, who at that time did not yet know that she would survive. Now this place is like an altar of memory. Not in the literal sense, but in the spiritual. He left a piece of himself there, and he wanted to return it. When he sat down on the same bench, his heart beat differently. Not fast. but tight. As if each beat was a reminder, you are alive. You are here. People passed by, with coffee, with children, with phones. No one recognized them. And that was what gave him strength, and suddenly, footsteps. Easy, familiar. He didn't turn around immediately. He was just waiting. I thought I'd find you here, she said, Alexandra. No more bandages. In her eyes, a shadow of pain, but also the light of new hope. I wanted to show you something. She took out a notebook. This is the first chapter of the book. I don't know if it will become famous yet. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I wrote it. Thanks to you. He took the notebook. The first page began with the words, I met a man who didn't want to be anyone's hero. He just listened. But that's what saved me. He closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, not from fatigue. From peace. And what now? She asked. Maybe it's time to get behind the wheel again. But without the apps. Just drive. And listen. Maybe it's time for you to be the one who is listened to. Do you think I have anything to say? You have the main thing: stories. Live. Real. The ones that screenwriters fear. And that readers are waiting for. She handed him another page. There was a title, Taxi Driver. One day. 1,000 lives. I want this to be your book, Keanu. Not about you. But about them, those you saved without saying anything. And if you let me, I will write it, silence. But now it is not emptiness. It is an answer. He looked at her. And finally nodded. Right. That night the world learned that Keanu Reeves was a taxi driver. Not because someone exposed him. But because he told it himself. The story came out without loud headlines. Without sensationalism. With only one message: every person has something that can save someone. Sometimes it's just silence. In different corners of the world, strangers are reading a book, some are crying, some are smiling. Someone gets into a taxi and looks the driver in the eyes, not like before, because suddenly there may be someone inside him who listens. The story that began as an experiment became a choice. And the choice became life. Keanu was no longer looking for himself. Because he found others. And in them, the real himself.